Officer James Blake had a simple job: collect the money, keep people scared, maintain the system. It worked perfectly for years. Every business paid their protection fees. Every complaint disappeared. Every threat was silenced. Until he walked into the wrong auto shop. Now Harold Carter, a Vietnam vet who refused to kneel, sits in a jail cell on trumped-up charges. But Blake's about to learn what real fear feels like. Because that phone call the old man made? It wasn't to a lawyer. It was to his son. Colonel Damian Carter, the ghost. And when a Delta Force commander comes home to find his father behind bars, corrupt cops are about to discover why some nightmares wear a badge. In Millbrook, justice isn't just coming, it's already here. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. Harold Carter wiped the grease from his weathered hands with a red shop rag, studying the engine before him with practiced eyes. After 43 years of fixing cars, he could diagnose most problems by sound alone. The 2015 Toyota Camry in his garage had a failing water pump. He'd bet his Bronze Star on it. Sunlight streamed through the open bay doors of Carter's auto repair, catching dust motes and golden beams. The familiar scents of motor oil, rubber, and metal filled the air. Harold had opened this shop right after returning from Vietnam, turning an abandoned building on the outskirts of Millbrook into his own piece of the American dream. Now, at 72, he still worked 6 days a week, though his joints protested more than they used to. A wall of photographs near his workbench told the story of a life well lived. Harold in his army uniform, young and proud. His late wife, Margaret, smiling beside their newborn son, Damien. Awards and certificates from decades of honest work. And in the center, his most prized possessions, 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star earned in the jungles of Vietnam. The bell above the office door chimed. Harold didn't look up immediately, focused on loosening a stubborn bolt. "Be right, with you," he called out, his deep voice carrying across the garage. "Take your time, old man. We've got all day." Something in that voice made Harold's spine stiffen. He recognized the sneering tone of Officer James Blake, one of Millbrook's finest. And, by finest, Harold meant most corrupt. Setting down his wrench, he turned to face his visitors. 3 police officers stood in his garage. Blake, a tall white man with close-cropped blonde hair and cold blue eyes, stood front and center. Flanking him were Officers Thompson and Walker, both wearing expressions that suggested they weren't here for car trouble. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Harold asked, keeping his voice steady and professional despite the unease growing in his gut. Blake sauntered forward, running a finger along the hood of the Camry and examining it with exaggerated interest. "Nice operation you've got here, Carter. Real nice. Been here what, 40 years? 43. 43 years. Blake whistled low. "That's a long time to run a business in this town. Must be doing something right." Harold watched as Blake circled the car, recognizing the predatory movement for what it was: intimidation. He'd seen enough of it in Nam to know when someone was trying to make him sweat. "I do honest work for honest pay. Always have." "See, that's the thing," Blake said, stopping to lean against the Camry's fender. "Times are changing. Costs are going up. Insurance, regulations, safety inspections. It's getting harder for small businesses to stay afloat. Wouldn't you agree?" The implication was clear as day. Harold had heard whispers about this happening to other businesses in town, especially those owned by minorities. The police would show up, talk about protection fees, and make life hell for anyone who refused to pay. "I manage just fine," Harold replied firmly. "And my insurance and inspections are all up to date." Thompson, a stocky officer with a perpetual scowl, stepped forward. "Nobody's questioning that, Mr. Carter. We're here as community liaisons, making sure local businesses have the support they need." Harold had to fight back a bitter laugh. Support? More like extortion with a badge. He thought of his son Damien, wondering what he would do in this situation. But Damien was halfway around the world, doing things Harold wasn't supposed to know about. This was Harold's fight. "I fought real enemies before," Harold said quietly, meeting Blake's gaze. "You? You're just bullies in uniform. The temperature in the garage seemed to drop 10 degrees. Blake's fake smile vanished, replaced by something ugly and raw. He straightened up, hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. Careful, old man. That sounds like disrespecting a police officer. Could be seen as disturbing the peace. Harold didn't back down. I served this country with honor, earned 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. I know my rights, and I know what you're really here for. Walker, the youngest of the 3, shifted uncomfortably. But Blake just smiled, a cold, dangerous expression that didn't reach his eyes. 500 a month, Blake said flatly. Consider it a community support initiative. Keep the neighborhood safe. Make sure nothing bad happens to your business. Harold's hands clenched into fists. No. No? Blake raised an eyebrow. Maybe you should sleep on it. Think about what could happen to a place like this. Cars are complicated machines. Lots of things can go wrong. Fires start. Windows break. Would be a shame if something happened and emergency services were delayed in responding. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Harold thought of all he'd built here, all the customers who depended on him, all the years of hard work. But he also thought of his father, who taught him that a man who gives in to bullies loses something he can never get back. Get out of my shop, Harold said, his voice carrying the same authority it had when he'd commanded men in combat. Unless you're here for actual police business, we're done. Blake's face darkened. He stepped close to Harold, using his height, advantage to loom over the older man. You're making a mistake, old-timer. A big one. The only mistake, Harold replied evenly, was thinking you could intimidate me. I've stared down real killers, men who believed in something, even if it was wrong. You're just a thug with a badge. The officer's hand tightened on his weapon, but Harold didn't flinch. For a long moment, the 2 men locked eyes, Harold steady and unflinching, Blake's burning with barely contained rage. Finally, Blake stepped back. Let's go, boys. Mr. Carter needs time to reconsider his position. He turned to leave, but paused at the garage entrance. Remember what I said about fires, old man. They can start so easily in places like this. Harold watched them leave, waiting until their patrol car pulled away before letting out a long breath. He knew this wasn't over. Men like Blake didn't take kindly to being stood up to, especially by someone they saw as an easy target. That evening, Harold closed up shop later than usual, making sure everything was secure. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as he double-checked the locks on the bay doors. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet, perhaps. He was just heading to his truck when he noticed movement in the shadows across the street. 3 figures lurked near the abandoned warehouse, watching. Harold recognized the stance, the deliberate way they positioned themselves. Not random thugs, cops, out of uniform. Instead of showing fear, Harold walked calmly to his vehicle, started it up, and drove home like it was any other day. But his mind was racing, planning. He'd need to install security cameras, maybe talk to some of his veteran buddies about keeping an eye on the place. The next morning, Harold arrived at work early, just as the sun was rising. From half a block away, he could tell something was wrong. Glass glittered on the sidewalk, catching the dawn light like cruel diamonds. As he got closer, his heart sank. Every window in the shop had been shattered. The bay doors were covered in spray paint, crude messages and symbols that made his blood boil. But it was what he found inside that made his hands shake with rage. His tools, thousands of dollars worth of equipment collected over decades, had been scattered and broken. Oil had been poured over customer vehicles, and there, on his workbench, lay a dead rat with a note pinned to it. Next time, it's you. Harold stood in the middle of his devastated shop, surrounded by the wreckage of his life's work. But instead of fear, he felt a cold, familiar clarity, the same feeling he'd had in the jungle when his unit was under fire. He'd survived worse, much worse. He was calling his insurance company when the health inspector arrived. A thin man with a clipboard and a smirk that matched Blake's, he immediately started writing citations. Looks like you've got some serious violations here, the inspector said, making a show of noting the broken glass and spilled oil. Operating in unsafe conditions, potential environmental hazards. I'm going to have to shut you down until these issues are addressed. Harold knew the game. The inspector was as dirty as the cops, part of the same corrupt system. But he also knew that fighting back directly would only give them what they wanted, an excuse to arrest him. So he drove to the police station to file a report, documenting the vandalism and threats. He knew they wouldn't do anything, but he needed the paper trail. What he didn't expect was to find Blake waiting for him in the lobby. Well, Blake drawled. Look who's here to cause trouble. I'm here to file a report, Harold said firmly. My business was vandalized last night. Is that right? Blake's smile was all teeth. Funny how things like that happen when people don't appreciate police protection. But from what I hear, you've got bigger problems. Health violations, safety, concerns. Might be best to just sell the place. I know some people who'd give you a fair price. Harold felt his temper rising but kept his voice level. I'd like to speak to your supervisor. Disturbing the peace again, Mr. Carter? Blake's hand went to his cuffs. Making unfounded accusations. Against law enforcement. Resisting an officer's lawful commands? Before Harold could react, Blake had him against the wall, cuffs snapping around his wrists. The older man didn't resist. He knew better than to give them an excuse for more violence. Harold Carter, Blake announced loudly. You're under arrest for disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, and making threats against a police officer. Other cops watched as Harold was fingerprinted and photographed, his dignified face forced to stare straight ahead for a mugshot. None of them intervened. None of them seemed surprised. In his cell, Harold sat quietly, thinking of all the men he'd served with who'd died believing in justice and freedom. Thinking of his son, who carried on that fight in shadows most people never saw. He was allowed one phone call. Harold knew exactly who to call. The phone rang 3 times before it was answered. Despite the distance and encryption scrambling the connection, Harold would know that voice anywhere. Dad, what's wrong? Son, Harold said quietly, I need your help. Remember what you always said about bullies in uniform? There was a pause, and when Damien spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming something cold and focused, like a weapon. Being drawn. Tell me everything. As Harold explained the situation, he could almost see his son's expression changing, could almost feel the deadly calm that he knew would be settling over Damien's features. He didn't know exactly what his son did for Delta Force, but he knew enough. Knew that the men harassing him had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I'll handle it, Damien said finally. Just hang tight. And Dad? Yes? Don't worry about the shop. These men are about to learn what real fear feels like. The line went dead, and Harold leaned back in his cell, almost feeling sorry for what was about to happen to Officer Blake and his corrupt friends. Almost, because sometimes justice needed to wear a badge, and sometimes it needed to move in shadows. And his son? His son was very, very good at moving in shadows. 3,000 miles away, in a classified location, Colonel Damien Carter stood motionless in the shadows of a dimly lit operations room. The air was thick with tension as his team monitored multiple screens showing thermal images of their target location. The silence was broken only by the soft hum of equipment and occasional whispered updates. Captain Sarah Williams, his second-in-command, approached with the quiet efficiency that had made her one of his most trusted operatives. Ghost, satellite, confirms minimal civilian presence. Extraction window opens in 20 minutes. Damien nodded almost imperceptibly. His team had spent months tracking this high-value target, a terrorist cell leader responsible for coordinating attacks across 3 continents. The mission was straightforward. Get in, capture the target, get out. No traces, no witnesses, no mistakes. Team check. Damien's voice was low but carried natural authority. One by one, his squad leaders responded, their voices calm and measured in his earpiece. Alpha in position. Bravo ready. Charlie team locked and loaded. Delta standing by. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned. Damien had earned his nickname the Ghost through countless missions like this, precise, silent, lethal when necessary. His reputation in Delta Force was almost mythical. Some said he could move through laser security without breaking a beam. Others claimed he once eliminated an entire enemy compound without firing a single shot. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. Lieutenant Mark Foster, their communications specialist, suddenly raised his hand. "Sir, incoming secure call. Priority Alpha." Damien's expression didn't change, but something in his gut tightened. Priority Alpha meant family. "Patch it through." The familiar voice of his father filled his earpiece, and Damien's world shifted. As Harold described the situation, the corruption, the threats, the arrest, Damien's teammates watched his demeanor transform. The ghost wasn't just a call sign, it was a state of being. Right now, they were witnessing something new. Cold, focused rage. "Understood," Damien replied, his voice carrying an edge that made several veteran operators exchange glances. "I'll handle it." After ending the call, he turned to Captain Williams. "Sarah, tactical command is yours. Complete the mission. I'm wheels up in 30. Williams stepped forward, concern evident in her expression. "Sir, what's happened?" "Some cops in my hometown just made a terminal mistake." Damien's words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "They laid hands on my father." The room fell silent. Everyone present knew Damien's background, raised by a Vietnam veteran who'd taught him everything about honor, duty, and standing up to bullies. They'd also seen what happened to people who crossed certain lines with their commander. "Take whatever you need," Williams said, already understanding that nothing would stop him. "We'll clean up here." Damien moved with practiced efficiency, gathering minimal equipment. He wouldn't need much. His most lethal weapons had always been his mind and training. Before leaving, he paused at the command station. "Lieutenant Foster, get me everything you can on the Millbrook Police Department. Full background checks, financial records, communications, everything. I want to know who's dirty and how deep it goes." Foster's fingers were already flying across his keyboard. "On it, sir. You want me to contact our DOJ liaison?" "Not yet. First, I need to understand the battlefield." As Damien prepared to leave, Sergeant Jason Taylor, a veteran operator who'd served with him for 8 years, approached. "Boss, you want backup on this?" Damien considered the offer. Taylor was rock solid, dependable in any situation. But this was personal. "No, keep the team intact for the operation. This is something I need to handle myself." The next few hours were a blur of secure communications and rapid transit. Damien called in markers from his extensive network, people who owed him favors, others who simply respected or feared him enough to help without questions. A military transport was quickly arranged, no questions asked. During the flight, Damien reviewed the preliminary intelligence Foster had gathered. The Millbrook Police Department's corruption ran deeper than simple extortion. There were connections to organized crime, money laundering operations, and possible ties to international drug cartels. Officer James Blake was just the visible face of a much larger problem. Damien's tablet lit up with a secure message from Foster. "Sir, you need to see this. Blake's got protection from higher up. Local politicians, judges, maybe even state level. This goes beyond dirty cops." A thin smile crossed Damien's face. Good. The bigger they were, the harder they'd fall. As the transport neared American airspace, Damien received another update from Williams. The primary mission had been completed successfully. Target captured. No casualties, no traces left behind, just as he'd trained them. "Thank you, Sarah," he said. "Keep the team ready. I might need resources if this escalates. Already on it, Ghost. Just try not to start a war in your hometown." Damien's response was cold and precise. "I don't start wars, Captain. I end them." Back in Millbrook, Officer Blake was enjoying his morning coffee, completely unaware that his world was about to change. The arrest of Harold Carter had sent the message he wanted. Nobody defied the new order in his town. The protection racket was running smoothly, kickbacks were flowing up the chain, and even the mayor was getting his cut. A young officer, Ryan Parker, knocked on his door. "Sir, we might have a situation." Blake barely looked up. "What is it, rookie?" "It's about Harold Carter's son. I was running background checks and..." Well, you need to see this. Blake waved him off. Some military kid? Probably pushing papers in some base somewhere. Nothing to worry about. Ryan persisted. Sir, he's not just military. He's Delta Force, command rank. His record is mostly classified, but what I could find... He swallowed hard. They call him the Ghost. Now Blake looked up, irritation crossing his features. The Ghost? What kind of comic book nonsense is that? Sir, I had a friend in Army intelligence. He said this guy, Colonel Carter. He's the kind of operator other special forces tell stories about. The kind of man governments call when they need something done, without leaving traces. Blake laughed, but there was a slight edge to it. You've been watching too many movies, kid. He's just another soldier. Ryan shook his head. No, sir, he's not. And there's more. The FBI just requested all our body cam footage from yesterday. DOJ is asking questions about our arrest procedures. Internal Affairs called twice this morning. The coffee cup stopped halfway to Blake's mouth. What? It's like someone flipped a switch. Every agency that could cause us problems is suddenly...
Very interested in Millbrook.
Blake set his cup down slowly, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. He reached for his phone, dialing a number he rarely used. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. This better be important, Blake. We might have a problem. That old man. We arrested yesterday? His son, the voice cut him off. If his son is who I think he is, you need to disappear. Tonight. What? Come on, he's just... Listen carefully, you idiot. I've seen this man's work. You don't understand what you've stepped in. Get out of town, change your name, and pray he doesn't find you. The line went dead, leaving Blake staring at his phone. For the first time since he'd put on a badge, real fear began to creep into his mind. Across town, Harold sat in his cell, waiting patiently. He knew his son well enough to understand what was coming. Not violence, at least not yet. First would come the pressure, the subtle dismantling of corrupt systems, the quiet gathering of evidence. Damien had learned early that the most effective weapon wasn't always a gun. The cell door opened, and a nervous-looking desk sergeant appeared. Mr. Carter, you're being released. All charges have been dropped. Harold stood slowly, dignity intact. Any particular reason? The sergeant wouldn't meet his eyes. Orders from above. Your personal effects are at the desk, and there's someone here to see you. Walking into the station lobby, Harold saw a familiar figure standing by the front desk. Tall, athletic, dressed in civilian clothes that couldn't quite hide his military bearing. Damien turned, and father and son locked eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Damien stepped forward, embracing his father briefly, but firmly. You okay, old man? Harold nodded. Nothing I couldn't handle. I know. Damien's voice carried pride and determination. But now it's my turn. They walked out of the station together, feeling the eyes of every officer following them. Just before they left, Damien turned and surveyed the room with a predator's gaze. His eyes met Blake's across the lobby, and he smiled, a cold, promising expression that made the corrupt officer step back involuntarily. Outside, the morning sun was bright and warm. Harold looked at his son, seeing not just the decorated officer but the boy he'd raised to stand against injustice. You don't have to do this, son. I can handle my own fights. Damien's expression softened slightly. You taught me never to back down from bullies, Dad. Never to let them win. Time for me to put those lessons to use. As they drove to Harold's shop, Damien was already planning. The police department's corruption was just the beginning. There would be politicians to expose, criminals to dismantle, an entire system of corruption to burn down. But first, he needed to send a message. Back at the station, Blake's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're not the hunter. You're the prey. Looking out his window, he saw a military drone flying high above the police station, barely visible against the morning sky. In that moment, Blake realized he had initiated a war he couldn't possibly win. The Ghost had come home, and Millbrook would never be the same. The morning after Damien's arrival, panic erupted within the Millbrook Police Department. Officer James Blake burst into Chief William Anderson's office without knocking, his face ashen. "We need to clean house. Now." The police chief looked up from his computer, his weathered face showing irritation at the interruption. "Calm down, Blake. What's got you so worked up?" "The ghost is here," Blake said, his voice cracking slightly. "Harold Carter's son, and he's not just some soldier. He's a goddamn Delta Force colonel with high-level connections. We've got FBI sniffing around, DOJ asking questions, and internal affairs crawling up our asses." Anderson's expression darkened. He'd been running this department for 15 years, carefully building a network of corruption that extended far beyond simple police brutality. The protection racket was just the visible tip of a very dangerous iceberg. "Get everyone on cleanup detail. I want every incriminating file shredded, every digital record wiped, and get that body cam footage from Carter's arrest deleted immediately." Across the station, officers scrambled to execute the chief's orders. Hard drives were being wiped, paper files fed into industrial shredders, and evidence logs carefully modified. The sound of destruction echoed through the building like a corrupted heartbeat. Officer Ryan Parker watched from his desk, his conscience weighing heavily. The rookie cop had joined the force with idealistic dreams of serving and protecting. Instead, he'd found himself in the middle of a cesspool of corruption. As his colleagues rushed to destroy evidence, Ryan made a decision that would change everything. Quietly, methodically, he began copying files to an encrypted drive. The body cam footage from Harold's arrest, financial records showing suspicious payments, emails discussing protection fees, everything he could access without raising alarms. His hands trembled slightly, knowing that discovery would mean more than just losing his job. Meanwhile, Mayor Thomas Gregory sat in his luxurious office, finishing a phone call that made him increasingly uncomfortable. "Yes, I understand the severity. No, we can contain this. I'll handle Carter personally." He hung up, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. The mayor had built his political career on carefully managed corruption. Every month, hundreds of thousands of dollars flowed through various community improvement programs, money that found its way into offshore accounts and private pockets. The police department was just one piece of his criminal empire. Gregory picked up his phone again, dialing a number he rarely used. "Marcus, we need to meet. Now." An hour later, the mayor sat in a private room at the Sterling Club, facing Marcus Davidson, the regional boss of the syndicate that really controlled Millbrook. Davidson was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that couldn't quite hide the predator beneath. "This better be important, Thomas," Davidson said, sipping expensive scotch. "I don't like emergency meetings." "We've got a situation with the Carter case," Gregory explained, trying to keep his voice steady. "His son." "I know about the son," Davidson cut him off. "Colonel Damien Carter, the ghost." He set his glass down carefully. "Do you have any idea what you've stumbled into?" "He's just one man," Gregory protested weakly. Davidson laughed, a cold, empty sound. "Just one man? Let me tell you about just one man. 3 years ago, a cartel boss in South America thought he was untouchable. Had an army of mercenaries, political protection, the works. This one man went in alone. When he left, the entire operation was dismantled. Everyone involved either dead or in custody. No traces, no witnesses, no loose ends." The mayor's face paled. "What do we do?" "You pray." Davidson stood up. "I'm pulling our direct operations out of Millbrook. Temporarily," he added, seeing Gregory's panicked expression. "Let things cool down. And Thomas, don't call me again until this is resolved." Back at the police station, Blake was personally overseeing the destruction of evidence when Officer Ryan approached his desk. "Sir, the FBI's asking for specific files. If we don't provide them, we'll tell them the system crashed," Blake snapped. "Technical malfunction. Lost everything from the past week." Ryan nodded carefully. "Yes, sir. And the physical evidence, the photos from Carter's shop? Being handled as we speak." Blake turned away, dismissing the rookie. What Blake didn't know was that Ryan had already secured copies of everything. The young officer had grown up in Millbrook, watched his community suffer under corrupt leadership. Now he had a chance to make things right. As evening approached, Ryan made his way to Carter's auto repair. His heart pounded as he parked his personal vehicle a block away, checking carefully for surveillance. The shop was closed, but light spilled from beneath the bay doors. He found Harold and Damien inside, discussing repairs to the vandalized equipment. Both men turned as he entered, Damien's hand moving slightly toward his hip before relaxing. "Officer Parker," Harold said quietly. "Didn't expect to see you here." Ryan swallowed hard. I have something you need to see." He pulled out the encrypted drive. "Everything they're trying to hide. Financial records, body cam footage, emails. It goes way deeper than just harassment." Damien stepped forward, studying the young officer with intense eyes. "Why?" "Because this isn't what I signed up for," Ryan answered honestly. "This town deserves better." A small smile crossed Damien's face, the first genuine one since he'd returned home. "You're right, it does." He took the drive, then handed Ryan a secure phone. "You're going to be our inside man. Think you can handle that?" Ryan straightened his shoulders. "Yes, sir." As Ryan left, Harold looked at his son. "Can we trust him?" "We'll see," Damien replied. "But my instincts say yes, and we need eyes inside the department." The next morning, Blake arrived at work to find a single playing card on his desk, the ace of spades with a message written in precise handwriting. "I know everything." His hands shaking, Blake grabbed his phone to call the chief, but the line was already ringing. "Anderson." "Chief, we've got a problem. The ghost. Get to my office now." The chief's voice was tight with stress. "And Blake, make sure you're not followed." When Blake entered Anderson's office, he found both the chief and Mayor Gregory waiting. The mayor looked like he hadn't slept, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. "It's worse than we thought," Gregory said without preamble. "The syndicate's pulling out. They say Carter's too dangerous to risk direct confrontation." Blake scoffed. "He's not superhuman. We've got over 50 armed officers." "Shut up, Anderson." "Cut him off." "You don't get it. This isn't about firepower. Carter's got federal connections, high-level ones. One phone call from him and we could have every alphabet agency in Washington crawling through our files. Then we make sure there are no files to find," Blake insisted. "We've been cleaning house." "Too late," a new voice said from the doorway. All three men turned to find Damien Carter standing there, as if he'd materialized from thin air. None of them had heard the door open. Blake's hand moved toward his weapon, but Damien's cold smile stopped him. "I wouldn't. Really wouldn't." "This is a private meeting," Anderson started to say, but Damien cut him off. "Know what I find interesting?" He held up a phone, playing a video of Blake and his officers vandalizing Harold's shop. "How many cameras you missed? See, while you were destroying evidence, I was gathering it. Every bribe, every threat, every criminal connection. It's all documented." Gregory stood up, trying to project authority. "Now listen here." "No, you listen." Damien's voice was soft but carried an edge that made them all fall silent. "Right now, every major federal agency is receiving files detailing your operation. The protection racket, the money laundering, the drug trafficking, everything. But you've got a choice." He looked at each man in turn. "Cooperate, turn state's evidence, help us clean up this town, or..." He smiled again, and it was like watching a shark bare its teeth. "I start dismantling your lives piece by piece, and trust me, gentlemen, you won't enjoy that process." Before any of them could respond, Damien was gone, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread and three more. Playing cards, all aces of spades, the mayor was the first to break the silence. "He's bluffing. He can't have everything." As if on cue, their phones buzzed simultaneously. Each man found himself looking at damning evidence of his own crimes. Photos, videos, financial records, all meticulously documented. "Jesus," Blake whispered. Anderson reached for his bottom drawer, where he kept an emergency phone, one that connected him directly to their syndicate contacts. But when he opened it, he found only another playing card and a note. "They can't help you anymore." Outside, Damien walked calmly to his vehicle, speaking quietly into a secure comm unit. "Lieutenant Foster, release the first wave of evidence. To the feds. Let's see how they handle the pressure." "Already done, sir," Foster replied. "FBI's moving on their local informants. DOJ's preparing indictments. It's starting to unravel." "Good. Keep monitoring their communications. I want to know the moment anyone breaks ranks." Back in the station, Ryan watched as the corrupt officers began to panic. Some were already removing personal items from their desks, others making frantic phone calls to lawyers. The house of cards was starting to collapse. A senior detective approached Ryan's desk looking nervous. "Hey, rookie, you were on duty when we processed Carter's arrest, right? Did you happen to keep any unofficial copies of the paperwork?" Ryan maintained a carefully neutral expression. "No, sir. Everything went through normal channels." The detective cursed and walked away. Ryan waited until he was alone before sending a coded message through his secure phone. "They're getting desperate, starting to turn on each other." Across town, Harold worked on fixing his vandalized shop, but now he had help. Word had spread about what happened, and customers, many of whom he'd served for decades, showed up with tools and materials. It was a small act of defiance against the corrupt system that had terrorized them for so long. Damien watched from across the street, feeling a mix of pride and determination. His father had stood his ground, inspiring others to find their courage. Now it was time to show Millbrook what real justice looked like. He made one final call. "Captain Williams, I'm going to need that contingency package we discussed. Things are about to get interesting here." "Already en route, Ghost," Williams replied. "Try not to start a war." Damien smiled, watching as more evidence of corruption appeared on news sites and social media. The truth was spreading like wildfire, and no amount of covering up could stop it now. "Too late, Sarah," he said quietly. "The war's already started. They just don't know they've lost yet." That evening, as the sun set over Millbrook, the police station was in chaos. Files continued to disappear, but for every piece of evidence they destroyed, two more seemed to surface. The corrupt officers were running out of options, and they knew it. In his office, Chief Anderson stared at his computer screen, watching as years of careful corruption crumbled around him. He had one last card to play, a private security firm with experience in handling difficult situations, but as he reached for his phone, it lit up with a message. "Think carefully about your next move, Chief. Remember, you're not the hunter anymore." Anderson looked out his window at the darkening sky, where a military drone hung silently, watching. The game was over. They just hadn't admitted it yet. The early morning light cast long shadows across Carter's auto repair as Damien surveyed his father's shop. The vandalism had been mostly cleaned up, thanks to loyal customers who'd rallied around Harold. Fresh paint covered the graffiti, new glass replaced the shattered windows, and the garage was alive with the familiar sounds of tools and engines. Harold was beneath a lifted truck, his voice carrying from under the vehicle. "Hand me that torque wrench, would you, son?" Damien located the tool and passed it to his father's outstretched hand. The simple act brought back memories of childhood, learning about engines, responsibility, and the value of honest work. But now, watching his father work, Damien noticed the slight stiffness in Harold's movements, the lingering effects of his rough treatment at the police station. "You know they're watching the shop," Harold said matter-of-factly, sliding out from under the truck. His eyes flickered to the unmarked police car poorly concealed down the street. Damien's lips curved in a slight smile. "Let them watch. They're not the only ones gathering intelligence." Throughout Millbrook, a complex web of surveillance was already in place. Lieutenant Foster had remotely accessed the town's traffic cameras, while military-grade sensors monitored police radio frequencies. Every move Blake and his corrupt officers made was being recorded, analyzed, and added to the growing mountain of evidence. The bell above the shop door chimed. Both men turned to see Rachel Turner, a local journalist, entering the garage. She was young but carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned her reputation the hard way. "Mr. Carter." She nodded to Harold, then turned to Damien. "Colonel, I was hoping we could talk." Damien studied her carefully. Foster's background check had come back clean. Rachel was one of the few local reporters who'd tried to expose the department's corruption, though previous attempts had been quickly suppressed. "What would you like to know, Ms. Turner?" She pulled out a recorder. "I've been investigating the police department for months. Extortion, evidence tampering, connections to organized crime. But every time I got close to proving anything, my sources would disappear, or evidence would vanish." "Sounds frustrating," Damien replied neutrally. "It was. Until yesterday." Rachel's eyes lit up. "When someone anonymously sent me files documenting years of corruption. Bank records, surveillance footage, internal emails, everything I needed but could never prove." Harold glanced at his son, who maintained a carefully neutral expression. "That must have been quite a discovery," Damien said. "It was, but here's what interests me more." Rachel leaned forward. "The day after you arrive in town, federal agencies start investigating. Corrupt officers panic. The syndicate pulls out. And now, somehow, all this evidence surfaces. That's quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" Before Damien could respond, the shop's phone rang. Harold answered it, his expression growing serious. "It's for you," he said to Damien. "Someone named Foster." Damien took the phone, listening intently. His face hardened. "When?" "Keep monitoring. I'll handle it." He hung up and turned to Rachel. "How would you like an exclusive story, Ms. Turner? Something bigger than routine corruption?" "I'm listening." "The police chief just had a very interesting meeting with a private security firm, the kind that doesn't ask questions and doesn't leave witnesses." Damien's voice was calm, but his eyes had taken on a dangerous gleam. "I think they're about to make their first mistake." At the police station, Chief Anderson sat across from two men who looked military but definitely weren't. Their suits were expensive but cut to hide shoulder holsters, and their eyes constantly scanned the room, professionals assessing threats and exits. "We understand you have a problem that needs solving," the older one said. His accent was Eastern European, possibly Serbian. "We can help, but it will be expensive." Anderson pushed a thick envelope across his desk. "Half now, half when it's done. I don't want to know details. I just want Carter gone." The younger man picked up the envelope, thumbing through its contents. "It will look like an accident. Very clean, very professional. But we need information, his routines, security measures, weaknesses." "He stays at his father's shop most days," Anderson provided. "Minimal security, mostly cameras. He seems to work alone." The Serbian smiled thinly. "Overconfident. This will be simple." What none of them knew was that every word was being recorded. Tiny devices planted throughout the station captured the entire exchange, while satellite surveillance tracked the mercenaries' vehicles. That afternoon, Damien walked into the police station alone. Officers tensed as he moved through the building, his presence like a predator among prey. He walked straight to Blake's desk, where the corrupt officer was attempting to appear busy. "Officer Blake," Damien's voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "I've faced better men than you. And they're all gone." Blake tried to maintain his composure, but sweat beaded on his forehead. "Is that a threat, Colonel?" "No," Damien smiled. "Just a historical observation." He placed a file on Blake's desk. "You should review this. It's quite illuminating." Inside the file were photos, Blake meeting with syndicate members, accepting payoffs, orchestrating the vandalism of Harold's shop. But it was the last photo that made Blake's blood run cold. His daughter's college dorm room taken that morning. "Just so we're clear," Damien said softly, "I can reach anyone, anywhere. Remember that before you make any more poor decisions." As Damien left, Blake's phone buzzed. It was Anderson. "Meeting. Now. Bring everything we have on Carter." In the chief's office, Blake found Anderson and Mayor Gregory huddled over reports. The mayor looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usual polished appearance showing signs of strain. "The contractors are in position," Anderson said without preamble. "They'll move tonight. Blake shifted uncomfortably. Sir, maybe we should reconsider. If something goes wrong, nothing can go wrong, Gregory snapped. Because if Carter isn't stopped, we're all going down. The feds are closing in. Our accounts are being frozen. We need this handled now. None of them noticed the small red light, blinking under Anderson's desk, another of Damien's surveillance devices capturing every word. As evening approached, Harold's shop prepared to close for the day. Rachel Turner had spent hours interviewing both Carter men, building a story that would shake Millbrook to its core. As she left, she noticed unmarked vans positioning themselves around the neighborhood. They're here, she texted to the secure number Damien had given her. Inside the shop, Damien checked his phone and smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. He'd identified the mercenaries hours ago, former Serbian special forces, now working as contractors for the highest bidder. Good, but not good enough. Dad, he said casually, why don't you head home early? I'll finish up here. Harold looked at his son knowingly. You sure about that? Positive. Just stay inside tonight no matter what you hear. After Harold left, Damien moved with practiced efficiency. He killed the main lights but left one dim bulb burning in the office, a clear target for anyone watching. Then he settled in to wait, every sense attuned to his surroundings. The attack came just after midnight. The mercenaries moved with professional skill, disabling the visible security cameras and approaching from multiple angles. They breached the side door with minimal noise, their weapons equipped with suppressors. The shop appeared empty. The office, light spilling across vacant workspace. The team leader hand-signaled his men to spread out, checking corners and blind spots. That's when everything went wrong. The infrared sensors they relied on suddenly became useless. The entire shop was hot, heat signatures everywhere. Their radio communications died, replaced by static. And in the darkness, something moved. The first mercenary disappeared without a sound. The second had time for a muffled gasp before he was gone. The team leader spun around, weapon ready, but he was fighting blind. His trained instinct screamed danger, but he couldn't pinpoint the threat. Where are you? He whispered into the darkness. Everywhere. Damien's voice seemed to come from all directions. And nowhere. The remaining mercenaries began to panic, firing at shadows. But they were professionals. They should have known better than to fire blindly. Each muzzle flash gave away their position. One by one, they were neutralized. No killing. Blows, but precise strikes that left them unconscious. The team leader found himself alone, back against a wall, heart pounding. A shape materialized from the shadows directly in front of him. Before he could react, his weapon was gone and an iron grip held him immobile. Tell your employers, Damien said softly, that the next team they send won't be leaving at all. Across town, Anderson paced in his office, waiting for confirmation. When his phone finally rang, his hand shook as he answered it. Is it done? No. An accented voice replied, thick with fear. It's not. We're out. Double the money, triple it, doesn't matter. We won't move against him again. The line went dead, leaving Anderson staring at his phone in disbelief. On his desk, a new message appeared on his computer screen. Strike one. By morning, rumors spread through Millbrook like wildfire. Stories of an elite hit squad taken down by a single man. Police officers requested transfers, fearing what might come next. The mayor didn't show up for work, and Chief Anderson's office remained locked. Rachel Turner's story hit the local news and was quickly picked up by national outlets. The evidence was irrefutable, the narrative compelling. A corrupt system exposed, a Delta Force operator defending his father, justice finally coming to a small town. Officer Ryan watched it all unfold from his desk, providing regular updates through his secure phone. The station was in chaos, with officers either rushing to make deals with federal investigators or desperately trying to cover their tracks. Blake sat at his desk, staring at the photo of his daughter, knowing he had a decision to make. When his phone rang, he already knew who it would be. Officer Blake, Damien's voice was calm. I believe it's time we had a real conversation about the future of Millbrook's police department. Are you ready to make the right choice? Blake looked around the station. at the corrupt system he'd helped build, at the fear in his colleagues' eyes, at the wreckage of his career. Finally, he spoke. "What do you need to know?" In Harold's shop, Damien cleaned up the minimal damage from the night's activities while his father worked on a customer's car. Neither man spoke about what had happened, but Harold's small smile said enough. The war wasn't over, but the first major battle had been won. The corrupt power structure was cracking, its enforcers losing nerve, its leaders running scared. But Damien knew the hardest part was still to come, because somewhere in Millbrook, desperate men were planning desperate measures. And when cornered animals strike, they strike without mercy or restraint. Looking out at the morning sun rising over his hometown, Damien welcomed the coming storm. After all, storms were what he did best. The morning after the failed mercenary attack, Millbrook Police Department was a powder keg of tension. Officers huddled in small groups, whispering about the night's events. The story had spread quickly. An elite team of contractors had gone after Colonel Carter and disappeared into the night. When they resurfaced hours later, they were broken, men refusing to speak about what had happened. Officer James Blake sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. The photo of his daughter haunted him, not because it was threatening, but because it represented everything he stood to lose. Years of corruption, of taking bribes and enforcing protection rackets, had seemed justified when he told himself it was for her future. Now that same future was at risk. His secure phone, the one used for syndicate business, buzzed with a message from Chief Anderson. "Emergency meeting. Evidence room. Now." The evidence room had become their de facto war room since Damien's arrival. As Blake entered, he found Anderson and several other senior officers already there, faces grim in the fluorescent light. "The body cam footage is gone," Anderson announced without preamble. "Not just deleted. Someone uploaded it directly to the FBI's servers. They have everything from Carter's arrest." A heavy silence fell over the room. That footage didn't just show Harold's wrongful arrest. It captured years of systematic corruption, with officers openly discussing bribes and threats. "How?" someone asked. "The system was locked down." "How doesn't matter," Anderson snapped. "What matters is damage control. We need to—" He was cut off by the sound of his phone ringing. The caller ID showed Mayor Gregory's number. "Where the sill?" "Hell have you been?" Anderson demanded, putting the call on speaker. "Listen carefully." Gregory's voice was shaking. "The feds just raided my house. They have everything. The accounts, the offshore transfers, the syndicate connections. They're coming for all of us." Before anyone could respond, the evidence room door opened. Officer Ryan Parker stood there, his young face serious. "Chief, there are federal agents in the lobby. They're asking for you." Anderson's face went pale. "Stall them." He turned to his officers. "Destroy everything, now." But as they moved to comply, every computer screen in the room suddenly came to life, displaying the same message. Too late. Across town, Damien sat in Harold's office, watching multiple feeds on his laptop. Lieutenant Foster's voice came through, his earpiece. "Sir, the mayor wasn't lying. DOJ just launched a major operation. They're moving on multiple locations simultaneously." "Good," Damien replied. "Monitor the department's communications. I want to know the moment anyone tries to contact the syndicate." Harold looked up from his paperwork. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Damien allowed himself a small smile. "Just making sure justice is served, Dad." "Uh-huh." Harold's eyes twinkled. "That's why you had your team set up that light show with their computers for justice?" "Psychological warfare," Damien corrected, but his smile widened slightly. "Sometimes the best weapon is fear itself." Their conversation was interrupted by Rachel Turner, who burst into the office without knocking. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. A breaking news alert scrolled across the screen. "FBI raids Millbrook City Hall. Mayor Gregory missing." Damien's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "When?" 20 minutes ago. Sources say he slipped out just before the agents arrived. But that's not all. Rachel's eyes were bright with reporters' excitement. Remember those financial records you provided? They don't just implicate the mayor and police, they lead straight to Thomas Lynch. Harold sat up straighter. Lynch was a notorious cartel leader who'd managed to stay untouchable despite years of federal investigations. His organization had been pulling strings in Millbrook for years, using the corrupt police force to protect their operations. Lynch won't take this lying down, Harold warned. No, Damien agreed. He won't. He touched his earpiece. Foster, I need everything we have on Lynch's local operations. And get me Captain Williams. Within an hour, Damien's prediction proved correct. 3 black SUVs pulled up outside a warehouse on the outskirts of town, one of Lynch's many front operations. The cartel leader himself stepped out, surrounded by heavily armed security. Through surveillance cameras, Damien watched as Lynch met with Chief Anderson and several high-ranking officers. The audio feed was crystal clear. "This has gone too far." Lynch's voice was cold. "Carter needs to be dealt with permanently." Anderson shifted nervously. "The contractors failed." "The contractors were amateurs," Lynch cut him off. "I'm talking about serious measures. My people are already in position." What Lynch didn't know was that his people had been compromised hours ago. Captain Williams and her team had intercepted the cartel's advance force before they could establish themselves. The only ones left were those in the warehouse, and they were about to get a surprise. Damien's phone buzzed with a text from Officer Ryan. "Federal task force moving in. ETA 5 minutes. Perfect timing." The raid was swift and precise. FBI tactical teams breached the warehouse from multiple entry points, while local SWAT units secured the perimeter. Lynch and his men barely had time to react before they were surrounded. But the cartel leader had one more card to play. "If I go down," Lynch announced calmly, "every piece of evidence I have on this department's activities goes public. Every crime, every payoff, every cover-up. Your careers aren't just over. You'll all die in prison." Anderson and his officers looked at each other, weighing their options. That's when Blake stepped forward. "Too late," he said, pulling out a badge that wasn't from the Millbrook PD. "Federal task force. I've been undercover for the past year documenting everything." The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. Lynch's face contorted with rage as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. What followed was chaos. Lynch's security team opened fire, turning the warehouse into a war zone. Federal agents returned fire while Anderson and his corrupt officers tried to flee. Through it all, Blake maintained his cover story, a fiction Damien had created just hours earlier. The truth was simpler. A corrupt cop who'd finally chosen to do the right thing, helped along by the realization that his daughter's future would be better served by justice than by blood money. The gunfight was over quickly. Lynch was taken into custody, along with Anderson and most of the corrupt senior officers. A few managed to escape in the confusion, but their faces were already being circulated to law enforcement agencies nationwide. Back at Carter's auto repair, Damien watched the aftermath unfold through various feeds. Rachel Turner was already on scene, documenting everything. Her story would run nationally by morning, exposing the full scope of Millbrook's corruption. "Think it's over?" Harold asked, bringing his son a cup of coffee. "Not yet," Damien replied. "Lynch was just the visible part. There's still—" His phone buzzed urgently. Foster's voice came through, tense. "Sir, we've got movement at the mayor's estate. Multiple vehicles, heavily armed men. They're not police or federal agents." Damien was already moving. "The mayor's making his play. He's afraid Lynch will talk, so he's bringing in his own cleanup crew." He checked his weapons. "Get me satellite coverage and alert the FBI." "Already done. But sir, there's something else. We intercepted communications suggesting they're not just after the mayor. They're coming for you and your father." Harold, who had been listening, picked up a shotgun from behind his desk. "Let them come." "No," Damien said firmly. "You're getting to safety. I've got a safe house ready." He made a call. "Officer Ryan, time to earn your promotion. I need you to escort my father somewhere." Minutes later, Ryan arrived in an unmarked car. As Harold reluctantly got in, he grabbed his son's arm. "Be careful. These aren't corrupt cops or cartel thugs. If the mayor's calling in his real muscle? I know, Damien smiled grimly. That's what I'm counting on. As Ryan's car disappeared into the night, Damien prepared for what was coming. The mayor's estate was a fortress, but every fortress had weaknesses. And after years of operating in shadows, Damien knew exactly how to exploit them. He touched his earpiece one last time. Foster, get me everything on the estate's security system, and tell Captain Williams to prepare for Contingency Plan Delta. Already on it, Ghost. But sir, these guys are serious players, ex-military, special forces background. Good, Damien's voice was cold. Then they'll appreciate what's about to happen. At the mayor's estate, Gregory paced nervously in his study. Outside, professional killers patrolled his grounds, ready to eliminate anyone who threatened to expose his operation. But as he stared out into the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer the predator, he was the prey. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. With trembling hands, he answered. Hello? The men you hired? Damien's voice was calm, almost conversational. They're good. Ex-Delta Force, some CIA contractors, the kind of people who know how to make problems disappear. Gregory's mouth went dry. How did you... But here's what you don't know about them, Damien continued, as if the mayor hadn't spoken. 3 years ago, I commanded their unit in an operation they'd rather forget. They know exactly who they're up against. As if on cue, the estate's lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Gregory heard his security team's radio channels erupt, with static. Last chance. Damien's voice was softer now. Surrender to the FBI or learn why they call me the Ghost. Gregory looked out his window again. In the moonlight, he could see his security team moving with increasing desperation, searching for a threat they couldn't find. One by one, the lights around the estate winked out, each darkness accompanied by a muffled sound that might have been a highly trained operative discovering why some legends were better left unchallenged. The mayor's nerve broke. With shaking hands, he dialed the FBI's number. As federal agents swarmed the estate, they found the mayor's security team zip-tied and unconscious, their weapons disabled. Of the Ghost himself, there was no sign. The next morning, Millbrook awoke to headlines that would change the town forever. The mayor in custody, the cartel's operation exposed, a corrupt system finally brought to justice. At Carter's Auto Repair, Harold returned to find his shop untouched, his son calmly drinking coffee, as if nothing had happened. The mayor? Harold asked. Singing like a bird to the feds, Damien replied, along with Lynch and most of the department. Harold nodded, then smiled. You missed a spot, by the way. What? When you were cleaning up after taking down the mayor's hit squad. There's still some dirt on your boots. Damien looked down at his immaculate footwear, then back at his grinning father. Very funny. But as they both knew, the smile didn't last long, because despite their victories, the biggest threat was still out there. The syndicate that had pulled the strings from the shadows wouldn't take this defeat lightly. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. Mayor Thomas Gregory sat in a federal holding cell, his expensive suit wrinkled and his composure shattered. For the past hour, he'd been watching a parade of his former associates appear on the small television mounted in the corner, each one rushing to make deals with prosecutors. The empire he'd built was crumbling and paranoia was setting in. A guard appeared at his cell. Your lawyer's here. But when the door opened, it wasn't his attorney who entered. Damien Carter stood there wearing a visitor's badge and a slight smile that made Gregory's blood run cold. You can't be in here, the mayor stammered. Actually, I can. Federal consultant status has its privileges. Damien sat down across from him. We need to talk about the syndicate. Gregory's face went pale. I don't know what you're... Alexander White, Damien said quietly. That's who you really answer to, isn't it? The man behind everything. The one even Lynch was afraid of. The mayor's reaction confirmed everything. His hands began to shake and sweat beaded on his forehead. You don't understand. If I talk about White, I'm dead. He has people everywhere. Had, Damien corrected. Past tense. Your protective network is gone, Mr. Gregory. The only question is whether you want to go down with it. Before the mayor could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red lights flashed in the corridors as guards rushed past the cell. Damien's phone buzzed. Lieutenant Foster's voice came through. "Sir, we've got a situation. Someone just tried to access the mayor's cell block. Professional team, military-grade equipment. White's cleanup crew." Damien nodded. "Right on schedule." Gregory grabbed the bars of his cell. "You have to protect me, they'll kill me." "That's the plan," Damien agreed. "Unless you tell me everything, right now." The mayor broke. For the next 20 minutes he poured out details about Alexander White's organization, the legitimate businesses that served as fronts, the politicians on the payroll, the international connections that made his syndicate untouchable. Outside the prison, White's team discovered why attacking a facility containing a Delta Force operator was a terminal mistake. Captain Williams and her unit had been waiting, and the resulting takedown was swift and silent. "Clear," Williams reported through Damien's earpiece. 6 hostiles neutralized, no casualties. "Good," Damien turned back to the mayor. "Your friend White just lost another team. Ready to finish your story?" Across town, Officer Ryan Parker sat in a secure FBI command post, helping federal agents map out the syndicate's network. His knowledge of local operations, combined with the mayor's confession, was painting a picture that stretched far beyond Millbrook. "The scale of this is incredible," Special Agent Sarah Matthews said, studying the evidence board. "White's organization has tentacles in 12 states. Police departments, judges, politicians, all compromised." Ryan nodded. "And Millbrook was just a small part of it, a testing ground for their methods." His secure phone buzzed with a message from Damien. "White's making his move. Be ready." In his penthouse office 50 miles away, Alexander White received news of the failed prison hit with characteristic calm. The silver-haired man had built his empire through patience and calculation, not emotional reactions. "Send the video," he instructed his security chief. Minutes later, every digital billboard in Millbrook began playing the same footage. Surveillance video of Harold Carter's shop, showing the old man working alone. The message was clear. White could reach anyone, anywhere, but Damien had anticipated this. The moment the billboards changed, Foster activated their countermeasures. Every screen went dark, replaced by evidence of White's crimes, photos, documents, banking records. The syndicate's secrets played out across the city for all to see. "Impressive," White admitted, watching the chaos unfold. "The ghost lives up to his reputation." He turned to his chief of security. "Implement Protocol 0, burn everything." Throughout the region, White's organization began self-destructing. Files were shredded, hard drives wiped, witnesses eliminated. But they were too late. Everything was already copied, documented, and in federal hands. At Carter's Auto Repair, Harold watched the digital warfare play out on nearby screens. "You knew he'd try something like this?" "Men like White are predictable," Damien replied, checking his weapons. "They think technology gives them power. They forget that every system has weaknesses." His phone buzzed again. Captain Williams. "Sir, we've got movement. Multiple vehicles heading toward Millbrook. Professional operators, heavily armed." "White's not burning everything," Damien realized. "He's launching a full assault. He wants to make an example of us." Harold reached for his shotgun, but Damien stopped him. "No, you're getting out of here. Ryan's waiting with a tactical team." "The hell I am," Harold protested. "This is my fight too." "Dad," Damien's voice softened. "You taught me to stand up to bullies. Now let me finish what you started." Before Harold could argue further, Rachel Turner burst into the shop. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. On the screen, a live news feed showed chaos erupting across the city. White's men were moving in, engaging in running gun battles with federal agents. "This is their endgame," Damien said. "They're trying to create enough chaos to cover their escape. He touched his earpiece. Foster, track every vehicle entering or leaving the city. Williams, coordinate with FBI tactical teams. No one gets through. The next hour was pandemonium. White's operators, realizing they were trapped, began taking hostages. Police scanners crackled with reports of armed men barricaded in buildings, demanding safe passage. But Damien had prepared for this too. Every member of his team had trained for urban warfare and hostage rescue. One by one, White's men found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. In his penthouse, White watched his forces crumble. For the first time in decades, real fear began to creep into his eyes. He turned to his remaining security detail. Get the helicopter ready. Sir, his chief of security looked uncomfortable. Our pilots, they're not responding. On the building's helipad, 2 unconscious pilots lay zip-tied next to their sabotaged aircraft, another piece of Damien's plan falling into place. White's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but he knew who it would be. You've cost me a lot of money, Colonel Carter, he said, trying to maintain his composure. Money? Damien's voice was cold. Is that what this is about for you? I'm talking about justice. For every person your organization has hurt, every life you've destroyed. Justice? White laughed harshly. You're a soldier. You understand power. That's all this world respects. No, Damien replied. I understand duty, honor, things you abandoned a long time ago. Look out your window. White moved to the floor-to-ceiling glass. In buildings across the street, red laser dots appeared on his chest. Sniper teams, perfectly positioned. It's over, Damien continued. Your men are captured or dead. Your organization is exposed. The only question is whether you want to survive the next 30 seconds. For a moment, White stood perfectly still. Then slowly he reached for a hidden panel in his desk. You're right about one thing, Colonel, he said quietly. It is over. The explosion rocked the entire floor. White had chosen suicide over capture, taking his remaining security team with him. But he'd forgotten one crucial detail. Everything in his office, including his hidden files, was fireproof. As federal agents swarmed the burning building, Damien coordinated the final cleanup. Throughout Millbrook, White's remaining forces were surrendering, realizing their organization was finished. Officer Ryan's voice came through the radio. Sir, we've got the last group cornered at the old warehouse district. They're asking to negotiate. No negotiations, Damien replied. They surrender unconditionally, or they don't surrender at all. The standoff lasted barely 10 minutes. White's men, seeing federal helicopters circling and tactical teams moving, chose survival over loyalty to a dead man. At Carter's auto repair, Harold watched the news coverage with a mixture of pride and concern. His son had done what seemed impossible, dismantled a criminal empire that had seemed untouchable. But as the adrenaline faded, a new worry set in. What happens now? He asked as Damien returned. White might be gone, but there are others like him. Yes, Damien agreed. There always will be. But today we showed them something important. He smiled slightly. That sometimes the monsters in the shadows should be more afraid of what's hunting them. Special Agent Matthews arrived with a team of federal agents, looking both impressed and slightly wary. Colonel Carter, we've recovered White's files. The amount of corruption we're uncovering, and it's going to take years to process everything. Then you better get started, Damien replied. Because this isn't just about Millbrook anymore. This is about sending a message to every corrupt official, every criminal organization, every person who thinks they're above the law. Rachel Turner was already typing furiously on her laptop, her exclusive story taking shape. The public needs to know everything, she said. No sanitized version, no political spin. The whole truth. They'll get it, Damien assured her. Every detail, every name, every crime. Let them see what happens when good people finally stand up to bullies. As evening fell over Millbrook, the city began to heal. The gunfire had stopped, the hostages were safe, and the first wave of arrests was beginning. Federal agents led corrupt officials away in handcuffs, while news helicopters circled overhead. Officer Ryan, now acting police chief after the department's purge, coordinated with FBI teams to secure evidence. His commitment to justice, proven under fire, had earned him the respect of federal authorities. "We'll need to rebuild the entire department," he told Damien. "New training, new policies, new leadership." "You'll do fine," Damien replied. "Just remember what my father taught me. Integrity isn't about following rules. It's about doing what's right, even when no one's watching." Back at the shop, Harold finished working on a customer's car, refusing to let the day's events disrupt his routine. As he closed up for the night, he found his son standing in the doorway. "You know this isn't really over," Harold said quietly. "No," Damien agreed. "White's organization had connections we haven't uncovered yet. People who'll want revenge." "Let them come," Harold's voice was firm. "We'll be ready." Damien looked at his father, the man who'd taught him about courage, about standing up to evil, about never backing down from a fight worth fighting. "Yes," he said softly. "We will." As night settled over Millbrook, the city felt different. The air was clearer, the shadows less threatening. Citizens walked the streets without fear, knowing that justice had finally come to their town. But in secure facilities across the country, intelligence analysts were already processing White's recovered files. New names emerged, new connections were mapped, and new threats took shape. The war wasn't over. It was just moving to a larger battlefield. And somewhere in the darkness, the ghost was waiting. The federal courthouse in Millbrook had never seen anything like this. News vans lined the streets, their satellite dishes reaching toward the morning sky like mechanical flowers. Journalists from across the country crowded the steps, each hoping to capture the moment when one of America's largest corruption cases began. Inside, Harold Carter adjusted his tie, the crisp fabric of his dress uniform still fitting perfectly after all these years. His bronze star and purple hearts caught the fluorescent light as he waited outside the courtroom. The prosecution had chosen him as their first witness, the spark that had ignited this firestorm of justice. Damien stood beside him, his own dress uniform drawing respectful glances from passing federal marshals. "You ready for this, Dad?" "Benny, ready for 40 years. Harold replied quietly. "Time these people answered for what they've done to our town." The courtroom door opened, and Rachel Turner emerged, notepad in hand. "They're about to bring in the defendants. You should see this." Inside, the scene was unprecedented. 3 rows of defendants filled the space. Former Mayor Gregory, ex-police chief Anderson, Officer Blake, and dozens of other corrupt officials. Behind them sat Thomas Lynch, the cartel leader whose empire had crumbled, his usual arrogance replaced by grim resignation. Judge Michael Harrison entered, his reputation for incorruptibility the reason he'd been chosen to preside. As everyone rose, Harold noticed the judge's security detail was unusually large, a necessary precaution given the reach of White's former organization. "Be seated," Harrison commanded. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to begin what will likely be one of the most significant corruption trials in recent history. The charges include racketeering, extortion, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and numerous other federal violations." The lead prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez, approached the podium. Her opening statement was measured but devastating. "Your Honor, what we will prove in this court goes beyond simple corruption. This is the story of an entire system designed to prey on innocent citizens. A system that turned law enforcement into criminals, public servants into extortionists, and nearly destroyed a community. But it's also the story of how that community fought back." She turned to the jury. "Our first witness will be Harold Carter, a decorated Vietnam veteran whose courage in standing up to this corruption set in motion the events that brought us here today." As Harold took the stand, he could feel the weight of every eye in the courtroom. The defendant's high-priced lawyers leaned forward, ready to challenge every word. "Mr. Carter," Martinez began, "please tell the court about the events of last month, beginning with the day Officer Blake entered your shop." Harold's voice was clear and strong as he recounted that first confrontation. He described the threats, the vandalism, his wrongful arrest, each detail adding another brick to the wall of evidence against the corrupt system. And why did you refuse to pay their protection money? Martinez asked. Harold's eyes met Blake's, across the courtroom. Because 40 years ago, I fought for this country's principles. Freedom, justice, the rule of law. I wasn't about to let some corrupt cops take that away from my community. The defense attorneys objected, claiming inflammatory language, but Judge Harrison overruled them. He could see the jury was captivated by Harold's sincerity. Next came Officer Ryan Parker, his testimony particularly damaging because it came from inside the corrupt system. He described years of systematic abuse, illegal orders, and cover-ups. When he reached the part about secretly saving evidence of Harold's arrest, several defendants visibly slumped in their seats. "And what made you decide to preserve this evidence?" Martinez asked. Ryan's answer was simple but powerful. "Because I became a cop to protect people, not prey on them." During a brief recess, Damien received an urgent message from Lieutenant Foster. "Sir, we've got movement. Multiple known associates of White's organization have been spotted entering Millbrook." "Keep them under surveillance," Damien replied, "but don't move unless they make a play. We need this trial to finish." Back in session, the prosecution called their surprise witness, James Blake. The former officer had agreed to testify against his co-defendants in exchange for consideration during sentencing. As Blake took the stand, the other defendants shot him looks of pure hatred. But Blake's focus was on his daughter, seated in the gallery. Everything he was doing now was to give her a better future, one built on truth rather than corruption. "Officer Blake," Martinez began, "please tell the court about the organization's structure. How did the corruption work?" Blake laid it all bare. He described how the protection racket fed into larger criminal enterprises, how evidence was routinely destroyed or falsified, how honest officers were pushed out or intimidated into silence. His testimony directly implicated Mayor Gregory in organizing the system and Lynch in providing cartel support. During cross-examination, the defense tried to paint Blake as a desperate man lying to save himself. But his detailed documentation, preserved by Officer Ryan, proved impossible to discredit. The day's most dramatic moment came when Rachel Turner testified about her years investigating the corruption. She presented article after article that had been suppressed, witnesses who had been threatened, evidence that had mysteriously disappeared. "Ms. Turner," Martinez asked, "what changed? Why were you finally able to expose this story?" Rachel's eyes found Damien in the gallery. "Because someone finally gave the good people of Millbrook the protection they needed to stand up and tell the truth." As she stepped down, one of the defendants, a former judge deeply implicated in the corruption, suddenly stood up. "This is a waste of time. Everyone in this room knows what's really going on. This whole trial is a sham." "Judge," Harrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "One more outburst like that, and you'll be removed from this courtroom." The former judge sat down, but not before shooting a meaningful glance toward the gallery. Damien noticed and touched his earpiece. "Foster, that signal was meant for someone. Check the courthouse perimeter." Within minutes, Foster reported back. "Multiple armed individuals taking positions around the building. They're good, using crowds as cover." "Have Williams and her team ready," Damien instructed. "But hold position. Let's see their play first." The trial continued as the tension built. The prosecution presented financial records showing millions in illegal payments, surveillance footage of corrupt transactions, and recordings of incriminating conversations. During another recess, Damien spotted a familiar face in the crowd outside, one of White's former lieutenants who had escaped the organization's collapse. Their eyes met through the courthouse window, and Damien saw the cold determination there. They weren't here to free the defendants. They were here to silence them. "Ryan," Damien called quietly. The young officer approached. "Get my father to the secure room we prepared. Things are about to get interesting." Ryan nodded, understanding the unspoken message. They had anticipated this, a last desperate attempt by White's remaining loyalists to prevent their secrets from being exposed in open court. As the afternoon session began, Martinez called her final witness, an FBI forensic accountant who had traced the organization's financial network. But halfway through his testimony, the courthouse lights went out. In the momentary darkness, multiple things happened at once. The defendant's security team, secretly infiltrated by White's men, drew weapons. Federal marshals responded, but the situation was chaos, or it would have been if Damien hadn't planned for exactly this scenario. Emergency lights snapped on, powered by independent generators. Every exit except the secure ones was already locked down, and White's men found themselves facing not just federal agents, but Captain Williams's elite team, strategically positioned throughout the building. The attempted attack was over in minutes, with minimal shots fired and no casualties. When the main power returned, the would-be assassins were in custody, and Judge Harrison was calling the court back to order as if nothing had happened. "Nice try," Damien muttered, knowing the captured men would lead them to more of White's hidden work. The trial resumed with increased security. Over the next few hours, the full weight of evidence against the corrupt system became overwhelming. Financial records, surveillance footage, witness testimony, it all painted a picture of systematic corruption that had nearly destroyed a town. When the prosecution rested their case, the defense team seemed deflated. Their attempts to discredit witnesses had failed. Their claims of evidence tampering fell apart under scrutiny. Even their arguments about procedural violations were systematically dismantled. The jury took less than 4 hours to reach their verdict. As Judge Harrison prepared to read it, Harold and Damien sat together in the gallery, watching justice finally arrive in Millbrook. "Madam Forewoman, has the jury reached a unanimous verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." One by one, the verdicts were read. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Count after count, defendant after defendant. Mayor Gregory's face turned ashen. Chief Anderson seemed to age years in minutes. Lynch, the cartel leader, remained stoic, but his hands trembled slightly. When it was done, Judge Harrison addressed the court. The depth of corruption revealed in this trial is unprecedented in this district's history. It represents not just criminal behavior, but a fundamental betrayal of public trust. His sentencing was equally historic. The major players, Gregory, Anderson, Lynch, and their key lieutenants, received life sentences. Others received lengthy terms based on their level of involvement. The message was clear: systemic corruption would not be tolerated. As the defendants were led away, Blake stopped briefly near Harold. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything." Harold studied the former officer. "Make it right by helping them clean up other departments. There are more towns like Millbrook out there." Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed for interviews. Rachel Turner's exclusive coverage had made her a national figure, with job offers from major networks pouring in. "Will you be staying in Millbrook?" she asked Damien as cameras rolled. "My work here is done," he replied. "But the real heroes are people like my father, Officer Parker, and every citizen who stood up and said enough. They're the ones who'll keep this town honest." Later that evening, Harold and Damien sat in the auto shop, sharing a quiet moment. As the sun set on a changed Millbrook, "You did good, son," Harold said simply. "We did good," Damien corrected. "Everyone who stood up, who told the truth, who refused to be intimidated, they're the ones who really won this fight." His phone buzzed, a message from Foster about White's remaining network, about other towns needing help, about battles yet to be fought. Harold saw the look in his son's eyes. "Another mission?" "There's always another mission, Dad. Always another bully who needs to learn that justice isn't just a word, it's a promise." As night fell over Millbrook, the town felt different. The shadow of corruption had been lifted, replaced by something powerful. Hope. Hope that one person's courage could spark a movement. Hope that justice, though slow, was ultimately unstoppable. And somewhere in the darkness, the ghost was preparing for his next battle. Because as long as there were people who abused power, as long as there were communities crying out for justice, he would be there. Silent. Watching. Ready. The morning sun cast long shadows across Millbrook's newly renovated police station as Ryan Parker was sworn in as the permanent chief of police. The ceremony was small but significant, a symbol of the town's rebirth after months of turmoil. Harold Carter stood in the front row, pride evident on his face as he watched the young officer who had helped save their community take his oath. I solemnly swear to serve and protect this community with honor, integrity, and dedication to justice. Ryan's voice carried clearly through the room. The badge pinned to his chest caught the light, not just a symbol of authority now, but a reminder of the responsibility that came with it. The small crowd included federal agents, local officials, and citizens who had stood up against corruption. Rachel Turner covered the event for her new national network position, though she still maintained her local connections. Her exposure of the scandal had earned her a Pulitzer nomination. After the ceremony, Harold found himself sharing coffee with Ryan in what had once been Chief Anderson's office. The space had been completely renovated, erasing the physical remnants of corruption while preserving evidence of the department's history, including photos of officers who had died serving honestly over the years. Strange being on this side of the desk, Ryan admitted. Keep thinking about everything that happened here. Harold nodded. The important thing isn't what happened, son. It's what happens next. Their conversation was interrupted by Ryan's new deputy chief, Sarah Mitchell, a veteran officer recruited from a neighboring state with a spotless record and a reputation for integrity. Chief, you need to see this. She handed him a tablet, displaying security camera footage from the town's outskirts. A convoy of unmarked vehicles had been spotted moving through neighboring counties, their occupants matching descriptions of known syndicate operatives. They're testing our defenses, Ryan said quietly, seeing if Millbrook's still vulnerable. Harold's expression hardened. Have you contacted Damien? Already done, Sarah replied. But there's more. We've intercepted communications suggesting this isn't just about revenge. They're afraid. Afraid? Harold raised an eyebrow. What happened? Here. It's spreading. Other towns are starting to resist. Corrupt officials are being exposed. The syndicate's losing control, and they think if they can reclaim Millbrook, they can stop the movement. Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Damien. In position. Let them come. Across town, Harold's auto shop had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of resistance, attracting customers from hundreds of miles away who wanted to support the man who had stood up to corruption. Harold had hired 2 new mechanics to handle the increased workload, both veterans like himself. But today, the shop was closed. Harold had sensed something coming, the same instinct that had kept him alive in Vietnam. He watched through the windows as unmarked cars cruised past, their occupants trying too hard to look casual. His phone rang, a secure line Damien had set up. Dad, you seeing our visitors? Hard to miss, Harold replied. These boys aren't as subtle as they think. They're not trying to be. This is about sending a message. The syndicate's desperate. They've, lost too much ground since Millbrook. Other communities are following our example. Harold moved away from the window. How many? 3 teams of 4, professional operators. Ex-military, probably Eastern European. They're setting up for a coordinated hit on multiple locations. The police station, courthouse, and your shop. Just like old times, Harold said, his voice carrying a hint of grim humor. You need me to leave? No. Damien's reply held a smile. I need you to be exactly where you are. Remember what you taught me about dealing with bullies? Sometimes you have to let them throw the first punch. Exactly. Captain Williams and her team are in position. FBI tactical units are standing by. And I've got a few surprises planned. The syndicate's attack came at dusk, coordinated and professional. They hit the police station first, expecting to find a soft target. Instead, they walked into a prepared defense. Ryan's new officers, trained by federal tactical instructors, responded with precision. At the courthouse, the second team found themselves caught in a crossfire. Captain Williams's operators had been waiting, their superior training and positioning, turning the ambush back on the attackers. But it was at Harold's shop that the syndicate learned their hardest lesson. The third team breached the building expecting to find an old man and a few mechanics. What they found was a Delta Force colonel and his hand-picked team. The fight was brief, but intense. Damien moved like a shadow, his years of experience turning the familiar space into a deadly maze for the intruders. When it was over, not a single shot had been fired. but the syndicate's operators were all unconscious, secured, and ready for federal custody. In the aftermath, as FBI agents processed the scenes and paramedics treated the few injuries, Harold stood with his son outside the shop. "They'll try again," Harold said. "No," Damien replied confidently. "They won't. Because this wasn't really about Millbrook anymore. This was their last desperate attempt to stop what's already happening across the country." He showed his father a tablet displaying news headlines from multiple states. Corrupt officials exposed in wake of Millbrook scandal. Police department reform movement spreads. Federal task force targets systematic corruption. You see, Millbrook was just the beginning. Every town they controlled, every officer they bought, every official they owned, they're all vulnerable now. Because people have seen that they can fight back. Harold smiled slightly. "And I suppose you'll be helping them." "Someone has to." Damien's phone buzzed with another message from Lieutenant Foster. "Speaking of which, another mission? A town in Arizona. Similar situation to ours. Local business owner standing up to corruption. Could use some help." Harold nodded. "Then, you better get going, he paused. "Remember to check in once in a while." "I will." Damien embraced his father. "Besides, I hear this place has the best mechanic around. Might need some work on my car soon." As Damien prepared to leave, Rachel Turner arrived for one final interview. Her coverage of Millbrook's transformation had sparked a national conversation about police reform and community empowerment. "Any last words for our viewers?" she asked. Damien thought for a moment. "Just this. Every system of corruption, no matter how powerful it seems, has one fatal weakness: good people who refuse to look away, who stand up and say, 'Enough.' Millbrook proved that. Now it's time for other communities to do the same." The next morning, Harold opened his shop as usual. The damage from the fight had already been repaired. Efficiency was a Delta Force trademark after all. As he worked on a customer's car, he noticed Ryan pulling up in his patrol car. "Just checking in," the new police chief said, "making sure everything's quiet." "Quiet's good," Harold replied. "Means people can focus on living their lives instead of looking over their shoulders." Ryan nodded. The FBI finished processing the syndicate's operators. They're talking, giving up contact networks, safe houses, financial records, everything. This goes way beyond what we uncovered before. Good. Let the feds handle that part. Our job is making sure Millbrook stays clean. About that, Ryan hesitated. I'm implementing new oversight procedures, civilian review board, body cam requirements, regular audits. But I could use someone with experience on the review board, someone who's proven they can't be bought or intimidated. Harold wiped his hands on a shop rag, considering. Trying to drag me into police work in my old age? Trying to make sure what happened here never happens again. After a moment, Harold nodded. "All right, but I'm not wearing a suit to meetings." As Ryan left, Harold's phone buzzed with a text from Damien. "Made it to Arizona. You were right about standing up to bullies. This town needs to learn the same lesson." Harold smiled, remembering a conversation from decades ago, teaching a young Damien about courage, about doing what's right even when it's hard. Now his son was passing that lesson on to others. The shop's bell chimed as a customer entered. Harold turned to help them, but his eyes caught the morning news playing on the small TV in his office. Another town was making headlines. Another community standing up to corruption. The movement that had started in Millbrook was spreading, carried by people who had seen what courage could accomplish. Harold had always taught his son that real change starts with one person refusing to back down. He hadn't known then just how far that lesson would reach. Outside, the sun climbed higher over a changed Millbrook. The shadow of corruption was gone, replaced by something stronger. Hope, courage, and the knowledge that justice wasn't just a word. It was a promise that ordinary people could keep if they were brave enough to try. In his office at the new police station, Ryan Parker looked at the photo on his wall, Harold standing up to Blake and his corrupt officers. It was a reminder of where they had been and what they had overcome. His phone lit up with a message from Damien. "Keep watching. Keep the town safe. The ghost may be gone, but his work continues. Ryan smiled, understanding the deeper meaning. Damien might have moved on to help other communities, but his impact remained. In the reformed police department, in the renewed sense of community, in the knowledge that one person's courage could change everything. As evening approached, Harold finished his last repair of the day. The shop was quiet except for the soft sound of tools being put away. But it was a peaceful quiet now, not the tense silence of fear that had gripped the town for so long. He looked at the bronze star mounted on his wall, remembering all the battles he had fought, in Vietnam, in Millbrook, in life. Each one had taught him something about courage, about standing up for what's right. His phone buzzed one last time. Another message from Damien. "This town reminds me of home. Before we cleaned it up. Think they're ready to learn what Millbrook already knows?" Harold typed back. "Just remember what I taught you. Sometimes the biggest bullies are the ones wearing badges and suits." "I remember, Dad. I remember everything." Harold smiled, knowing that somewhere out there, the ghost was preparing to teach another lesson about justice, about courage, about standing up to corrupt power. Because some lessons need to be taught over and over again. Some battles need to be fought in every generation. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't a gun or a badge. It's the simple courage to say no, to stand up, to fight back. As night fell over Millbrook, Harold looked out at his town, changed, renewed, stronger. The auto shop's lights cast a warm glow on the street, a beacon in the darkness. Just like the truth was a beacon against corruption, and somewhere out there, in another town facing its own shadows, the ghost was moving, silent, watchful, ready to stand with those who dared to fight back, because that's what Carter men did. They stood up to bullies. What makes a person finally stand up against corruption? Is it courage, desperation, or simply having nothing left to lose? In Millbrook, it started with one man refusing to bow to corrupt authority, one veteran who remembered what he'd fought for, one father's phone call that brought justice home. But perhaps the real question isn't about standing up. Perhaps it's about how long we stay silent, watching others suffer, until we realize that every moment of inaction makes us complicit in the system we claim to hate. Harold Carter didn't just save his town. He reminded us that sometimes the most powerful weapon against corruption isn't a badge or a gun. It's the simple courage to say no. And somewhere out there, the ghost is still moving through shadows, finding other towns like Millbrook, helping other people find their courage to stand up and say enough, because that's the thing about justice. It doesn't just happen. It needs people willing to fight for it. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more tales of justice, courage, and the price of standing up against corruption.